Well, hello everybody, and welcome to my show. My name is Jason DaCosta, and this is Consistent Preterism. Today is Tuesday. There's the Jeopardy Greatest of All Time continues tonight. I do enjoy that show. I enjoy the trivia aspect of it, and I oftentimes sit on my couch and compete against the contestants. And sometimes I do okay. I mean, you'd be surprised at how much, useless crap you know, just from years of studying, research, hearing people talk, whatever the case may be. You can actually become pretty good at this Jeopardy thing. And when I was a kid, I believe I was in 5th grade, 5th or 6th, but my history teacher, Mr. Cute was his name, he was on Jeopardy, and he actually won a few games, if I'm not mistaken. So that was kind of like our little claim to fame back when I was a wee little youngin'. So anyways, enough about Jeopardy. I just wanted to kind of yap about just some random things today, just as I'm thinking about the Christian beliefs and, things that I once believed and all that. And one of the ones that kind of really struck me was this whole being cursed thing, right? The Christian viewpoint says that everybody's cursed upon birth, right? And there's different variations of that, right? There's different slugfests within Christianity, and they slug it out and argue and debate endlessly and fight and cast each other to hell over these different variations of this doctrine, such as, you have those people who say that all humanity is wicked, vile sinners straight from birth, straight out of the womb. Wicked, vile, just gross, nasty humans who just are deserving of, the utmost punishment. And then you also have this group that says, oh no, babies come out pure, but there's an age of accountability that takes place, and then they become wicked, vile, desperate creatures who are in desperate need of salvation. So you have that aspect of it. And then you have this kind of third group that just says, that doesn't really hang their hat on either one. They just kind of acknowledge that all humanity is up shit's creek without a paddle type thing. And if you really think about it, right? If you think about that whole concept, you can't help but ask yourself how a Christian could say this on one hand, or out of one side of the mouth, they affirm that this is what they believe. But yet, at the same token, or at the same time, in the other hand, or out of the other side of their mouth, what do they say? Well, they say life is a blessing. Life is a blessing. We are so blessed. Blah, blah, blah. Right? Well, those two things can't be true together, right? Because logically, and I know, giving logic to someone who's brain numbed is like giving medication to a dead person. But logically, that doesn't work. That doesn't make sense, right? How can this life be a blessing, right? And being born be a blessing, and everything about this life be a blessing, if right alongside of that, you being born means that you're cursed, you're screwed, you're wicked, you're vile, and you're headed for punishment, right? That just doesn't work, right? If that's the truth, if that is the truth, and we were all born under some imaginary curse, and we are all headed for a eternal punishment, eternal lake of fire, this burning spiritual fire that burns our ghostly bodies, right? If that's what we're headed for, and that's every man's fate, then life is certainly not a blessing. Life is a curse beyond all reason, right? It is horrible, because the majority of people have lived and died and have never had any kind of experience with God. They've never seen God. They've never heard God. They've never experienced any kind of miraculous Holy Spirit. They've never spoken in tongues. They've never healed anybody. The majority of people throughout the world have never even heard the name Jesus. I mean, that's the reality of this, is that they've never even heard that name. Okay, once the excuse me, once the modern world came to be, I guess you would call it, things became easier to sort of pass around, whether it be information or books or internet. Who the hell knows, right? But obviously, messages and popular ideas and concepts are a lot easier and a lot quicker to go around the world and to be passed around nowadays than it was 300, 400, 500 years ago. So the majority of people who lived probably even as recent as maybe 150 years ago, 100 years ago, probably had no clue who Jesus even was, right? I mean, this world is a big, vast place. And although it seems like we can see it all here living in good old comfortable United States of America, we don't even have a clue how many people exist, nor do we have a clue how many people existed all throughout the centuries in remote places, in jungles, and who the hell knows where, right? Villages in the middle of nowhere. I mean, there's people everywhere. So the name Jesus is pretty much relatively unknown for the most part throughout the centuries. And yet that is supposed to be people's token or ticket out of this so-called cursed life that they've been given. While at the same time, mind you, they say that it's a blessed life. So how can it be a blessed life if it's also a cursed life? It just doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense. All right? I mean, obviously, the reality of it is that it is a very blessed life. It is a very good life. I mean, look around, okay? For most of us, it's a good life, I should say. I mean, we have everything we need. We have food, we have water, we have shelter, we have the means to provide for ourselves. And, and if you look at many places on Earth, it's just a very cool experience. Unexplainable, yes, but cool nonetheless. So, I do believe that being alive and being born is a blessing, of course. But that wouldn't be able to be said if you held the Christian viewpoint, because everybody is cursed and going to hell. So how could being given life be a blessing if that is the case and if that is the reality? It just can't. So that doesn't work. The other thing that's interesting is these people who quote Jeremiah 29. For I know the plans I have for you, plans to not harm you, plans to prosper you, plans to give you a hope and a future, yada, yada, yada. And of course, we know that that's all about Israel. I mean, God, it's painfully obvious. It's like people don't read a sentence before or after that passage. They just look at that passage. They say, oh, this is about me, and they ignore all relative context. Excuse me. But if we look at that passage and we look at where it comes from, and we look at the prophet and what else he said in his writings and all the other prophets and everything else they said in their writings, we can see that their whole focus was on Israel. That's all they really cared about, honestly. They cared about the people, their people, the chosen ones, supposedly, the ones that God chose high above all people, the ones that God protected and walked with and destroyed other nations because of. So this passage of God giving them a hope and protecting them and not hurting them and everything goes hand in hand with that motif, with that concept, which is all throughout the Old Testament writings. Now, I'm not saying that God doesn't care for people today. I'm not saying any of that. I'm not making any assumptions on that. I'm just saying what this text, this specific text, actually says and what it doesn't say. You know, it just comes down to just context, audience relevance. Since when do we read someone else's mail and say, oh, this is about me? Since when do we read letters that are written to other people, say, I don't know, 100 years ago, saying that they care for them, they love them, they're going to come see them, and say, oh, that must be about me. Look, 1822. Yep, this is about me. No, we don't do that. But with these ancient texts that were written about Israelites, for some reason, we do. We do that. We say, oh, yeah, well, this might be about Israel, but obviously it's about me too. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And again, I'm not saying that you can't believe that God loves you. I'm not saying that you can't believe that God cares for you, or that he wants to prosper you, or that he doesn't have plans to hurt or harm you. I'm just saying, just read the text for what it says, folks. Don't make stupid outside assumptions that aren't there, that aren't proven. Because they're not there. They're not proven. The only thing that text says is that God was going to protect Israel, provide for Israel. He had plans for Israel. He wasn't going to hurt Israel. He was going to give them a hope and a future. And it all kind of plays right into their return from captivity and all that stuff that's going on. Because again, Jeremiah was a Babylonian captivity prophet, and he was speaking about the conditions of that time frame. So, and I look around at Christians and I say to myself, man, like, some of them have a terrible, terrible life, like some of them are poor, some of them have no money, some of them are sick, some of them are diseased, some of them come down with cancer, some of them have all these different things going on, right? Some of them might have lost a child to murder. I mean, there's so many different things. And I'm not saying that the secular world is any different, because they experience the same things. But when you look at what takes place to the Christian, or in the Christian's life today, it's really no different than the secular world. Christians go through the exact same pain, the exact same struggles, the exact same hopelessness, the exact same situations that the secular world does. But according to that passage in Jeremiah 29, they shouldn't be, right? They should not be, right? So it's a sticky situation, because if you really boil it down, you got to ask yourself, why are people quoting this passage? Like, and what usually happens is they quote it when they're going through something, like, for instance, I broke my ankle, okay? I'm a Christian, playing basketball, I break my ankle. Now I'm screwed. I can't work. I'm kind of on crutches. I'm going to be out for, say, 3 months. All right. So what do? I jump on Facebook and I post Jeremiah 29, for I know the plans that you have for me, right? Plans to not harm me, plans to not hurt me, but to prosper me. And then I say to myself, well, gee, that's kind of odd. God says here that he doesn't plan to harm me, doesn't plan to hurt me, and he plans to prosper me. Well, I just broke my ankle, okay? I'm hurt, I'm injured, I'm harmed, and I can't prosper because I can't even work. So now I'm screwed, I can't pay my bills. Oh, glory to God, right? And I know it sounds kind of petty and stupid to even say it that way, but these are the things that I just wish people would think about more often. And this isn't to shipwreck people's faith, but I mean, come on, let's be realistic here. If that passage is true, and if you can supposedly stand on those promises, then read it for what it says. It says that God's plans are not to harm his people. God's plans are to prosper his people, right? It doesn't say anything about heaven. It doesn't say anything about, being saved. So this is some sort of spiritual afterlife promise. No, it's talking about the people in the here and now when Jeremiah wrote. So if you're going to apply that to yourself today, then you need to be consistent. And ask yourself, is God prospering you? Is God not harming you? Is God protecting you? Have you come across any hard times? And I think, I'm getting a little bit off base here, but I think you get the point. These things happen all the time. I really hate to bring it up, but Tom Mills, you guys remember Tommy Strawman Mills? Tommy Strawman Mills came out and presented a cringeworthy 40 points against IO, I don't know, 2 years ago maybe. And he did this because, everybody was kind of, frantic and rattled, and they didn't know what was going on. And IO was obviously growing and kind of like taking people by storm, and it was really stumping everybody. And the big dogs still to this day have not answered it, and they refuse to acknowledge it and engage it. But he did this as sort of like a desperate attempt to kind of like, almost damage control, just to take some of the heat off and say, well, look, he did something, he argued against it, right? And so I made a response to that and showed how all of his points are absolutely moot points, because what he did was in his 40 points, he basically just harped upon a lot of Old Testament passages that really are totally irrelevant to what IO teaches. They're totally irrelevant. They're just, all these passages are historical accounts supposedly of Israel and what happened to them, and how obviously they were proselytes, and foreigners joined their tribes and all this. And he's just going on and on about, well, since that happened back then, surely it's happening now. But, my thing was just to show how moot of a point that is, because that's irrelevant. There is no Israel to join to today, right? There is no such thing as a spiritual body of Israelites that one can become a member of today. That's ridiculous. Yet that is essentially what a lot of Christians believe. So I just showed how all of that's moot, how those Old Testament portions have no bearing and no relevance to what's going on in the New Testament, last days, and how that all ended and they all inherited their promise. That was the final moment. And it was all at hand. Excuse me. So I went through that, yada, yada, yada. Anyways, Tommy came back with another 40 moot points. I responded again with another demolishing of his points. But then, now mind you, this is a God-fearing, Jesus-loving, Bible-thumping Christian, right? And I don't know much about Tommy, but from a surface glance and his, videos that I've seen on YouTube, he seems like a fairly good guy, all right? He seems like he's a polite guy, a respectable man, a family man, good to his wife, good to his kids, the whole nine, right? And so what happens, right? Now, excuse me, very unfortunate situation, very sad. Maybe, I don't know how long ago, 3 months, 4 months, I'm not sure. His wife passes away, instantly passes away. Like, from what I hear, it was a matter of just days after she was diagnosed with this, like, extremely rare, fast-growing form of cancer. She died like 5 days after they figured it out. That's what she had. Mother of 9, okay, with a baby in the womb. Baby in the womb, so mother of 10, wife of Tom, Christian mother, servant of the Lord, the whole nine, right? From all observance and all my perspective, just people who are doing, God's work, basically. Even though I would disagree, they think they are. But the point is that where was the Jeremiah 29 passage, right? Where did that come into play? I know the plans I have for you, plans not to harm you, plans to prosper you and give you a hope and a future. This lady was just taken from her family, leaving Tom with no wife, leaving Tom to support 9 kids and take care of 9 kids, and some as old as maybe 1 year old infants. How is that plans to give you a hope and a future and prosper you and not hurt you, not harm you? I mean, that whole family was hurt. That whole family was harmed, violently harmed by the loss of their mother. And sure, there's lessons and things they'll learn from it. I get it, right? Sometimes a loss makes people stronger. Sometimes it brings family together. Sometimes it, shows you how important family is. Yes, there's always certain lessons that can come from tragic things. But that still doesn't take away the fact that the promise that these people sometimes quote from Jeremiah and all these other places in the scriptures is totally, totally contradictory to what just took place. Right? That just doesn't make any sense. So I look at things like that and I say, you know what? Like, something's not right here. Because in the Old Testament, according to the story that is, God always provided, always cared for, always protected his people as long as they were worshiping him and no other gods. And they were, obeying the commandments and keeping the covenant. It was a covenant arrangement. But that was the promise. And that Jeremiah 29 fits right into that. It was for those people. Now, when you crossed God as a covenant breaker, you got in trouble. He kicked you out. He exiled you. He abandoned you. He didn't abandon you, because there was always promises that he would bring them back all throughout the Old Testament. He would gather them from the nations, wouldn't you know it? But, he would punish them. But that's the whole story in a nutshell, the blessings and the curses of the covenant. And that's it. That's the only curse this story speaks of. The only curse. So, anyways, that's where I'm going to leave it for today. Just wanted to get on the old megahorn and yap a little bit, get you thinking, little common sense for you this Tuesday morning. Let's see, is there any other announcements I wanted to make here? I don't think so. So, yeah, we'll leave it at that. I hope you all have a wonderful day. If you liked it, give it a like, a Rooski. If not, you know what to do. We'll catch you on the flip side, folks. Take care. Bye-bye.